50 years ago today, the Gay Liberation Front took to the streets of London for the UK's first ever Pride event. A protest of defiance and solidarity with the Stonewall movement in America against the way police were treating the community. Back then, of course, there were very few people outwardly LGBTQ+, very few public role models. It was a dangerous time to be a gay person. For most, things have changed. This year, hundreds of thousands of people who take to the streets will be joined by celebrities, corporate sponsors, politicians. The march has evolved over the years, though some now question its priorities. Is it still a protest movement? Should it be in an era when gay rights are protected and enshrined in law? In a second, we'll talk to the original member of the GLF, someone who helped organise the first Pride March, Peter Tatchell. But before we do that, let me take you back 40 years to the days when Pride was political, the queers were revolting, and the media was beginning to pay attention.
Okay, so I'm gay. Now, why did you ring up? Are you gay yourself? Look, I know I'm queer. We know that. Don't need to repeat all that, right?
For years, the homosexual community has been forced to hide. Now, the Gay Switchboard and others like it throughout the country are symbols of what homosexuals call coming out. Throughout London, there's a flourishing gay culture, a growing confidence in the rallying call. It's great to be gay.
Since the 1967 Act, gays have increasingly come out into the open. Clubs and meeting places for homosexuals, almost unknown in the 60s, are now widespread, and gay activists are fighting more and more noisily for their rights.
In effect, it's the climax of 10 years in which homosexuals have acquired a new pride and a new name. Today they're called gays, and they're coming out on the streets of London. This march commemorated a famous brush with the law. 10 years previously in America, homosexuals who frequented the Stonewall Inn in New York's Greenwich Village grew exasperated at continuous police harassment and hit back. The riot that ensued was the flashpoint of the gay liberation movement. The Stonewall riot happened only a short time after another significant event, the Act of '67, which legalized homosexuality between consenting males over the age of 21 in England and Wales, but not in Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Merchant Navy or the Armed Forces. The Act and the riot lead logically to this, the biggest assembly of homosexual men and women Europe has ever seen. A spectacle quite unthinkable 10 years ago.
And Peter Tatchell is with me. Can you take me back to that time, the time of the Stonewall riots in 1969? How did it inspire you? And what do you remember from that first march?
I think that the LGBT plus movement in the UK obviously was inspired by the Stonewall uprising in New York in 1969, but we were a very homegrown British movement. We took some ideas, but we also developed our own course. And in fact, I think the first Pride parade in Britain in 1972 was the first in the world to use the word pride. In the United States, they called it Gay Liberation Day or Christopher Street Liberation Day, but we called it Pride. And of course, that was going completely against the prevailing consensus. Society said we should be ashamed of being gay. So our idea was to give LGBT plus people a sense of confidence and self-worth, to banish that guilt and shame, and to be out and proud about who they were.
What did you want? Because I can't imagine when you were on that march in 1972 that you thought we'd arrive at a position where we'd have gay cabinet ministers, gay marriage, gay adoption. Was that the aim at the time?
Well, the Gay Liberation Front had interim demands to end discrimination, such as, ending the unequal age of consent, which at that time was still 21 for gay and bisexual men, and LGBT plus education in schools to counter homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. But our real objective was to transform society. We did not want equal rights within what we saw as an unjust, flawed society. We wanted to change society to benefit ourselves as LGBT plus people, but also everyone else. So we allied with the women's liberation movement, the black community, working class people and the trade unions. We wanted a social revolution to benefit the whole of society, of which we were just one part.
Well, that's interesting because, I mean, there are feminists now who have a problem associating with Stonewall because of the position Stonewall has taken on trans women's rights. Does that concern you, that in a way Stonewall doesn't have the power that it once had?
Well, let's be clear. In the days of the gay liberation movement, trans people were part of it. We had an agenda for trans rights way back then. This is not a new phenomenon at all. And indeed, the gay liberation movement philosophy was very much about challenging gender conformism. We challenged traditional orthodox masculinity and femininity, male-female role models, the gender division of labour in society. We wanted a gender revolution, of which trans people were part. So I think our ideas, way back then, are still relevant today, because these traditional ways of looking at male and female, masculine and feminine, they put people in boxes, and we're not boxes. You know, we are individuals with our own creativity, and we want to have a society where everybody can live and let live. And you can be trans, bisexual, non-binary, gay, lesbian, whatever you want to be, providing you don't harm anybody else. It's up to you, and society shouldn't interfere.
But I wonder if you still see the Pride March tomorrow as a protest movement. You today have been on the Gay Liberation Front March, which always is a day earlier. Does that tell me that actually you think it's more of a carnival and a celebration than a protest movement?
Well, today's march was by veterans from 1972, some in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s. You know, it was their day because we were there in 72, and you were here because we were there. You know, this is very much a celebration of our 50 years, the journey we've been on, but also to remind people that back then, Pride was a carnival, a celebration, but also a protest. And I think today it's become more of a party than a protest. And I think you can have both.
Yeah, I suppose some people would say that's why there are more people there. It's not as political, it feels more open, they feel more welcome. I've only got a minute left. I just want to put one last thing to you. Relating to what we've just been discussing about the Supreme Court, the court could soon turn to LGBTQ plus rights in America. Does it concern you that those are being reopened? And what effect might that have globally?
Well, of course, whatever the US Supreme Court will apply in the US, but of course it will send a signal and embolden regimes like President Xi in China, who's cracking down on the LGBT plus community, Vladimir Putin in Russia, who is cracking down on his LGBT plus community. It will give those people grist and confidence that they are doing the right thing. They can point to the US that even the US is recognizing that these were rights too far. Now, I'm not too sure that the US Supreme Court will go down that road, but certainly we have to be vigilant. You know, rights given can be taken away. We should remember that in 1930, Berlin was the gay capital of the world. 3 years later, Hitler came to power, and the first gay men were being carted off to concentration camps. So be vigilant.
Enjoy Gay Pride tomorrow. Peter Tatchell, thank you very much indeed for being